And welcome back to the Baseball Development Hub podcast. My name is Trevor Powers, and I am joined as always on the podcast by co-host Dan Galati. Dan, we're going to have a really fun episode today talking about how player development has changed in the NIL era. But first, I want to make a plea to our listeners. We have a lot of new listeners. Our numbers have skyrocketed over the last month or so as we've continued to gain traction with this podcast. I'm looking at the data right now, Dan. 78.9% of our listeners are unsubscribed to the channel. So we're usually one that plug the subscriptions on the back end, which if you're still listening on the back end, that's pretty impressive. You must really like listening to us banter. But I wanted to make a plea at the beginning of the episode, maybe drive some new subscribers. If you're somebody you've been listening to this, just double check. You might be popping up on your For You page. You might be seeing our faces too frequently for your own liking, and you just click on the video and you listen to us for a little bit. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, both Baseball Development Hub podcasts on YouTube and Spotify, as well as Backside Ground Balls Media. But Dan, after that, how are we doing on this fine, gloomy Sunday morning here?
Doing good. Just trudging through the month of January. Just one day at a time. Worst month of the year, without question.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. It's just interesting. I think people are more miserable, and I think we live in a part of the country where people are typically pretty happy and jovial to interact with. You walk through the grocery store, there's a lot less smiles, there's a lot less interaction, it feels like, because I think everybody, you get hit with that post-holiday realization that it's winter, it's cold. We don't get to spend too much time outside. It's supposed to snow this weekend, at least in terms of North Carolina standards, which means a little bit of wintry mix, which is going to shut down the whole state. And then obviously people are going to be stuck on their couch, not being able to do anything. So really
Real
excited
quick,
to hopefully change into some better weather here soon.
See if I can derail this whole thing before we get going. Top 3 months of the year for you.
May.
Yep.
September.
Number 1, easy. Okay.
September, but this September is more late in life. I'll be honest with you. That's an excitement about college football, better weather. Sure. The weather stops being
minor
so
league
hot.
Football, but
yeah, minor league football. And then I'll just go easy with it and just go June. Like June, July, and August are kind of all similar in that realm.
I go 5, 6, 7. May, June, July for me. That's my top 3. It's not even close. All the other months I could do without. You just gave me May, June, July every year. Life is never better than those 3 months.
I would agree with that. It's definitely a lot of fun to be in those timeframes, actually being able to be outside, eat outside, extend your patio, whatever you got going on, whatever home projects you need. Our friends over at Home Depot and Lowe's will help you out. Fill in
Doers
the blank for
done.
presenting sponsor. Doers get more done. So Dan, I mentioned it. We'll actually stay in our expertise rather than home projects, which I think both you and I would agree we are below average at. I'm not going to say horrible, but below average, probably 40 grade home improvement men right there. But we're baseball guys. 2080 scale, 40 home improvement. So we'll talk about what we're actually seemingly experts in, and that's player development in the NIL era. So many people have obviously talked about how NIL has changed the sport. Transfer portal, free transfers in terms of multiple times if you'd like to. Obviously, you'll have a mid-major player that breaks out in a certain conference and kicks up to a higher level because his financial opportunities are going to be much larger, and all of those things that have changed. And people talk ad nauseum about how it's changed the roster construction of the sport, but nobody talks about how it's changed player development. And I think that's something that even from the conversations we've had on record, off record, that coaches are still working their brain around because it's still fresh and new. But in your perspective, what's the main thing that's changed in player development in the modern age where there is free market movement, where there is money being involved in all of the factors that is modern college athletics?
I think traditionally, when you thought about player development and you thought about player evaluation, more importantly, I don't know if you've ever read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but one of those habits is begin with the end in mind. And that's kind of what a lot of times in recruiting and player evaluation, and when you look at a player development track, that's kind of how you went about it, right? And that's how you do go about it, is you think about what this guy can turn into, its projection. And then you have to build a roadmap that, takes a bunch of different turns throughout the years, and due to, changing, external factors for that player. And you would think typically, what, 3 to 4 years down the road would be a lot of what you were doing in your player evaluation, especially if you're in the high school recruiting landscape, right? You're recruiting a high school kid who may be a junior, and you like to think 3 to 4 years down the road till he's a sophomore, junior in your program, and what he can turn into with growth factors, with whatever the player development track you think he needs is. Whether if he's a pitcher, it's like adding muscle mass to add velocity, developing new pitches. If it's a hitter, swing adjustments as he grows into his body a little more from 17 years old to 21. And obviously the huge changes that people just make throughout that time, in general, their growth, their maturity, and all that. Now it's beginning with the end in mind. When you player evaluate, like, a lot of times you have to think of the here and now. What can they do for me this year? If you're at a smaller program, a lot of times you would get guys that needed a lot of development, maybe undersized, maybe a little underskilled, um, because those are the kids that you could recruit. Those are the kids you were able to get into the door at your program. And obviously, all this is nuanced and is case by case. But just from a 10,000 foot view, that was kind of the way you would have to go about it. And now it's like, what can this player do for me this year? Because if I think 2, 3 years down the road, he might not be in our program, right? He might not be a guy that sticks around, because if we develop him really well, he could leave us. He could get a payment opportunity, a money opportunity. He could want to go somewhere to that gets more, a higher draft grade, programs that get a higher draft grade in a bigger conference. And if you're at a bigger school, do you want to invest years on a high school guy when you can go in the portal and get a kid who's 21 years old? No, you probably want a kid who's going to come in, and the chances of him pitching as a freshman, or being in your lineup as a freshman, are pretty high. Because if not, I can go get a 21-year-old out of the free agent market that is the transfer portal nowadays.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you mentioned it there. You look at the, like, close your eyes and imagine what college athletics playing trajectory is, right? And there was a point in time where Randy Moss was a freshman at Florida State, and he was only allowed to be on the practice squad because he was a freshman, right? Because there was so much long-term perspective on how those guys develop, right? And what they develop into as players, and all of those factors that come into play, right? So we look at what the 90s perspective of, player development was in all of college athletics. And it's, you sit as a freshman, you learn, you develop physically. Sophomore year, number two, you're backing up somebody who's been in the program for multiple years. You're in a position to maybe get some spot starts, fill in during some injuries, play some other positions, some pinch hitting opportunities. Year three, you're a starter. All right. Maybe you're hitting in the bottom of the order, but you're a starter. And then year four is obviously your opportunity to break out and have your historically good all conference season. That's like the all American dream of college athletics. Well, now we fast forward to the modern age of college athletics, and it's a sprint, right? How quickly can we get these guys to be productive? How quickly can we get these guys on the field? How quickly can they be a valuable asset to our roster? And that's the balance of what these programs are. And I think, again, I factor it in for, there's two sides of this, right? There's the Power Four programs who can go out and acquire the talent that's had the player development structure at another university and another program to enhance their roster, and they can afford to have backups that are making really good money and just go steal that kid from another roster and give them an opportunity. And then there's the mid-major programs that have to understand that there is a balance in still acquiring the 18-year-old and giving him a developmental structure, hoping that he develops into something that's really productive and really good, but not too productive and too good that he's out the door and leaving you high and dry where you're trying to find a replacement for that player. So it just creates this, sprint, as I mentioned, to what these players are going to be on the field. And that's not even to mention the 35 roster decrease. And now there's a lot of flexibility around that 35 number. When it was published and everybody was talking about that number, it seemed like it was set in stone, hard line 39. Well, with designated student athletes and all these things, we basically have glorified unlimited rosters, trust me. So that's a factor in it as well. But the main thing to say there is, as rosters have condensed, as player development has accelerated, not just in the resources we have, but also the timelines that we have, it's now at a point where coaches really have to bear down on, how can we get this person productive on this calendar year, and maybe not even look beyond that, right? Do we think this freshman is physically good enough to give us some playing time, but he could really take a stride if we put him on the back burner and developed him and seasoned him and marinated his player development structure, and next year he's a guy? I don't think that's in the cards for most programs right now. It's like, if this kid is like 8 or 9 in terms of our starting roster and offensively, he's playing, because there's no like, it's like, we either need to see if he's good enough, he's got it, and figure out what it is from there, or he's not good enough and we're going to try to replace him in the offseason anyway.
Yeah, and there's just so many different ways you can go. Like, I think one of the points you made there, like, I think if you're a school who maybe doesn't have the NIL budget, or I don't want to just group all of the mid majors into one, but if you're, for lack of a better way to kind of separate these programs, I don't think you can go into it and say, we don't want to make this guy too good because we'll lose him. Like, you just have to do what you do.
Definitely.
And right. Like, and just like, get the most out of the guys. And if they leave, it's unfortunate, but trust that, hey, we made this kid better, we can make the next one better. And that is a tough place to be. Obviously, is a lot more simple when there wasn't player movement the way it was, and you knew that these guys would stay in your program for 4 years. But I also think it kind of changes how you have to approach player development as a coaching staff when you look at like each individual player. And if this guy's ceiling is X, we might have to focus on Y and get, develop the things that can make them productive today. And not, because there were like, when you had unlimited, when you had bigger rosters and you had, again, the confidence that this person, this kid was going to be in your program for 3 to 4 years, you could put them on a developmental track where they're reaching their ceiling in year 3. And so maybe that's working on, like I said, X, Y, and Z. Now you have to focus on A, B, and C to get them to be productive today, because you need them to produce, like you said, if they're, fringe or even just behind. No, we need to work on the things that, like, okay, just from a pitching standpoint, if it's like, if we just, maybe, arming you with more velocity and putting more mass on and then changing the shape of your breaking ball is going to make you the best pitcher that we think you can be, that a weekend guy that's going to go out there and be able to start for us. We don't have the time to do that. We just need you to change your slider shape a little bit and throw it 70% of the time and work out of our bullpen, because we need you this year. And so what that causes is, instead of, being able to kind of go through the trials and tribulations of that development process that would get you to be that weekend guy on the mound, we now have to just have you focus on, that slider shape, working on those little things, maximizing what you do right now well, so that you can pitch for us today. And that certainly changes the way that you have to look at your roster, especially, and how you look at what, the best development track for each guy is. And instead of being able to kind of put guys on the back burner, or, maybe not expose them to, high leverage situations while they develop those things, you now have to develop them while they're exposing those things, which then adds in all these other factors, which is, it's really hard for, college age players to not be results oriented, which I feel like we now say once a week on here, right? Is like, they, just the mental makeup of these guys. And it's completely understandable, but like, now you're adding in, okay, we need you to develop while you play, right? And you've heard this from, some big league organizations use this term all the time, right? Develop while he's in the big leagues, right? Talking about bringing young players up maybe sooner than you would like, and have them develop while they're in the everyday lineup at the major league level. That can, some guys can do that really well, and some guys that crushes, right? And that's why you see different major league organizations have different philosophies on whether or not they're going to do that. Some are really patient and they don't call up their guy, their top prospects till they're absolutely ready. Some smaller market major league teams who need the help and need the impact right away, they bring those guys up as soon as they show any glimpse of like, hey, they might be able to handle this at the big league level, and then they hope that going through the tribulations of being on that stage every single day in the lineup every day with all the attention and eyeballs, they can work their way through it. It's kind of shifting to a similar idea at the college level, depending on what program you're at, where it's like, hey, you're good enough to be here every day. You're not the player that we need you to be, but you're good enough to maybe, give us innings on the mound or be in our lineup, 2 to 3 times a week. We need you to do it. And we're going to have to just ride the highs and lows that are come with you being a young player who's not at his peak potential.
Yeah, you mentioned it great there, and I was thinking about it as you were talking. Shocker, college athletics has become more professionalized in the decisions we have to make, right? And I think on both ends of the spectrum is it's a sink or swim proposition now. There is no patience anymore, right? On both ends, because this is ultimately a business, right? And there is no patience to be like, hey, man, we're just expecting you to be a guy in year 3. No, you have to be a guy in year 1, at least in some way, shape, or fashion. You either have to show potential or provide value.
And that's what players want too now, right? So
Yes.
that's you're seeing a lot of those guys are okay. Well, I think still like yes, money is a factor, but I still think the number one reason. By the way, this is not fact based. This is opinion based comment. I don't want anybody to like. If you have the numbers, I'd love to know them. But I still feel like probably the majority of kids transferring is playing time still, right?
Yes. Majority, definitely.
Yeah.
Like I would say 1%, maybe more than 1%, but let's just say actually in the whole transfer portal, even guys that kick down to Division 2 and Division 3, yeah, 1% of the transfer portal in baseball, not football, in baseball is driven by money. Yes, 100%. I think even to a certain extent, and we've talked about this off air, is like I don't even think it's that big of a factor in baseball because I don't think the money's as big as people want to imagine. And I know
There's a
Baseball
couple
America
programs. Yeah.
just, I think Baseball America just wrote an article about, what guys were making. And I think in football, at least there's more structure and understanding of value. I think baseball, it's like completely off the walls insane. Like some school might offer a guy 400K, or some school might be offering 150K, right? Like it's like that's where these like crazy offers are coming from, is because there's no market value factor. I think football has generally gotten to the point where it's like we know a quarterback costs this, Jordan Seaton as a tackle costs this, right? Like, and some teams might go above that number by a decent amount. But baseball, it's just the wild, wild west. It's like, we have the money, let's throw it at this guy. We have the money, let's throw it at this guy. Because at the end of the day, the coaching staffs are making those decisions, right? We don't have general managers. We don't have analytics people to put, valuations on these guys and all of those factors that come into play. But you are correct in the fact that the majority of times people enter the transfer portal is for playing time, because a lot of them go back down, right? They're P4 guys going to mid-major going to D2, and vice versa, right? So all of those factors that come into play, you are 100% accurate that players nowadays want to play. I mean, there is to a point where, a couple kids that have started college, after your freshman year, if you haven't broken out, there's a large subset of players that feel like they're behind the 8 ball entering their sophomore year, right?
Yep.
Like that's how accelerated this process is since we've eliminated the patience element of development and understanding what a player needs. Is if you haven't had a productive freshman season, and coaches are the same way. I mean, we've been in on coaching staffs, we've been talking to coaching staffs off the record and things like that, where if guys don't show glimpses of something as a freshman, it's like, yeah, he's never going to make it here, right? Like, and that's just the way the environment has been because of the free market movement, because of the if you want to say the NIL and bumping up, but I think it's more the free market movement that if you're not showing glimpses at 18 years old of being a productive player, more times than not, you're probably being moved to the back burner and they're excited about the next new incoming player. And again, it comes to the factor that it's more professionalized, right? At the end of the day, college baseball is more professionalized than it's ever been. And that's okay, right? In the grand scheme of things, like that's a fine factor, but it eliminates patience on both sides of the coin, where it's coaches want that productive value and it creates sink or swim, right? You mentioned the mental side of the game and what these guys in the professional ranks have to go through. Like it is legitimately make or break in these opportunities. There's no go get bigger and stronger and gain your confidence. There is no have live at bats against our Friday night guy on a Tuesday and go 2 for 2, because we're giving you those on the back burner when 100 people, or in the SEC 1,000 people, aren't watching, right? Like, there are no opportunities to gain confidence behind the curtain. Now the only way to gain confidence in the structure of college baseball is either doing it on the field against another opponent or not, right? And you could be the most talented kid in the world, but if you're not ready for that mentally, then we end up putting ourselves in a situation where that staff's never going to trust you, because you went out there and you were pitching in the SEC on a Friday in a game that was a throwaway. You were up 6 and they trusted you, and you go out there and you're spiking heaters and spiking curveballs, and you can't even get it out. Like, you think that player's ever going to gain his confidence again that he had at one point? Because in this environment, they forced that player into that scenario. Whereas in prior years, kid would have never sniffed them out. It would have been like, hey, you are going to spend the whole season with our strength conditioning staff. We're going to get you live reps when we need to. You're going to practice every day, obviously, but your main focus is going to be, we're going to take your 180-pound body and you're going to be 205 pounds by the next spring, and you're going to be a stud. That's what it used to be, right? When we had unlimited 40 roster spots and, red shirts that were actually real, and developmental tracks. Like, that used to be a legitimate thing where it's like, your main focus is to add mass, and we just want you to get jacked in this year. And that doesn't happen anymore because it can't.
I think it's raised to two things for coaching staff that you have to be, much better at, right? And I think one of those things is, which one should I say first? I think the most important thing is transparency with the guys on your roster, right? From the recruiting process, and a lot of coaches we've talked to have talked about how they are now checking in with their players a lot more often, right? In a one-on-one setting, they are having way more conversations so that those guys know exactly where they stand. It is so important now, because any kind of confusion from player to coach, and like lack of communication or breakdown in that communication chain, and it can cause, the angst, which can lead to guys walking out of the program. And you might be like, well, we really liked this guy. We thought he was going to have a chance, even, because there might be guys still, obviously only, a limited number of guys can still get on the field. So there are still situations where you have a guy that you think in a year or two, or it's less at 2, it's more like in the next year, he's going to be on the field for you every day. If you're not communicating that with him, and he doesn't understand exactly where he's at, and that's always been important, but I just think it's way more imperative now, because now, what is the people in his corner going to say? What is he going to see all his peers doing? They're hitting in the portal. And if you might have a freshman who you think is going to be really important to you as a sophomore, who can develop into that. And if there's lack of communication there and transparency on, what your role is, what we think of you, and here's how we need to get to the point where, we expect you to be, that angst that can be created there for that player, the incentive now is to go find a program that you're going to feel better about, feel more comfortable, gain that playing time.
Well, let's go back a couple years, probably almost to the day. We sat down with Tom Walter and kind of, it was at the beginning of the transfer portal era, and money probably wasn't what it is, and this year's transfer portal and all of those factors in play. But we asked that question straight up, was like, how do you balance that? Because they are a program that probably does a better job of holding on to guys that don't play, right? Like guys that they're high on that maybe don't play, and they give them the developmental structure. And exactly what you said is the exact process. We're honest with them. We have an open line of communication to the parents, to the agents, to everybody involved. We bring everybody to the table. We explain the why you're not playing, what we see you being in the future, how we're going to get you there, the resources we're going to put behind you. We build that relationship and get them to understand, right? And there's so many, I find it fascinating because I came across a relationship here in the Carolina area where a football player had played at a really big name program with a really big name coach who had spent years and years in the NFL and had won multiple Super Bowls.
Go ahead, keep giving clues.
It's not that obvious. And not to give away anything, because there were a lot of stories that would be a lot of fun and probably make us very, very viral and very, very intriguing. But this one kind of pertains to what we're talking about here. That coach, who spent a ton of time in the NFL, which is Bill Belichick, wanted nothing to do with the parents. Because in the NFL, you don't need the parents to be involved at all. Like, what would a parent be doing with 35? And he wanted nothing to do with the parents, nothing to do with the parent committee, nothing to do with any of those factors that come into play. Well, the reality is, as somebody who's been around college athletics, like the both of you and I have, and all these coaches that have experience in college athletics, the parents are the most valuable asset to have a line of communication with for a young guy, because when that kid doesn't play on Saturday, he doesn't pick up the phone and call his agent to discuss his problems. Maybe they do in some scenarios. He calls his mom and dad because he's 18 years old in the fall of his freshman year. So if you want these guys to believe in their developmental process, you have to understand how open that line of communication is to everybody, not just the player. You don't just have to have that explanation to the player. You have to have that explanation in a relationship with the parents, and you have to have that explanation in relationship with the agent. And even if that's against what you got into coaching for, I think Coach Walter explained this the best, of just being like, yeah, that wasn't coaching when I started, but I'm open to doing it because I care about these guys and I care about Wake Forest baseball and I care about what we're doing. And I think you see that a lot of times with programs is like, we have to over communicate now. We have to over communicate to everybody. If this kid has an agent, who the heck knows? His agent could be his cousin, his uncle, his buddy from high school, because there's no regulation of agents, which is a whole nother issue. I still have to be understanding of what that player needs if we see the value in it, right? And if we think he's worth the juice is worth the squeeze on said player. And it's just like you mentioned, we have to communicate the plan to get those guys to understand. And even then, with the instant gratification that our baseball society is right now, even then that might not be enough to convince them to hang around and to believe in your development and your long-term vision.
Yeah, we were at a program this year that had a transfer in from another program, and what was that kid's main complaint? He felt like he never talked to the coaching staff. It was communication, right? And that led him to transferring, and now he was at a program where he felt he was getting that communication piece better, I guess. And so it's like that is, if you're not going to, it's just become so much more important. And like you said, I think over communication is a good way to put it, because it's always been important to communicate. And I believe, and I think it's always been good for guys to know exactly where they stand and understand what the plan is. But then the second piece that ties into it is you better have a good developmental plan, right? Like, you better be able to sit down and say, this is the plan. These are the resources we can use. These are the resources we have. This is how we're going to do it. Because that's the other factor of this is if you tell them, you can't just say, hey, we think you're here, we think you're going to be really good, we're going to get you to this point, we think you can play a lot for us next year. With everything that, again, the facilities these guys can go to in the offseason, the resources that are out there, they want to know how. Okay, why, how and why. And like, that has become so much more important too, is you can't just say, hey, we think you're going to be good down the road. Well, how am I going to get there? Why do you think it's down the road? And I think that's become, because again, it is possible to still be a developmental program. There's tons of them out there who do a fantastic job. We had an episode a couple of weeks ago about how great player development is in the college baseball space right now. You just have to make sure that you're communicating with them if you're going to go about it this way, because I do still believe, like, I still think that a lot of mid-major programs, what are they built off of? And we see there's some absolute great ones out there, right? Like, well, what do they do well? They're still developing guys that come in out of the high school ranks. They're still developing guys that kick back, right? It's not like, these mid-major programs are just pick and play guys from higher levels. No, because if those guys were that good, they would be doing it at the level they're at. No, it's like, come back here. We're going to develop you. You might not have been on the development track for them. You're on the development track for us. So we're going to get in. We're going to make you better. We're going to turn you into something. And, because you see a lot of times the transfers at bigger programs, some SEC schools, right? Are they developing some of these guys? No. They're like, hey, come in and plug and play. We need you to be who you are. And then, again, they'll tweak some things and maybe they'll get better on the periphery, but they're not the huge developmental gains that you see when a guy goes from 18 to 21 and stays in a program for a long time. So it's still possible. It's just like, you have to over communicate to them. You have to be transparent about it. You have to let them know. And you could do all of that great and still lose them. And that's just the reality of today's landscape. And I think one of the things is you have to have thick skin about it, right? Like you can't get, you can't change everything you're doing if you're really successful at that. And that's, you know, who you are as a coach and what your coaching staff is good at, just because you lose guys when you do that well. Because
Yeah.
again, you have to have the confidence that, hey, we'll get the next crop in and we'll do the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, if we continue to lose guys, that's in some ways, it probably never feels this way. I'm sure it's a compliment to you and your coaching staff and your program that bigger schools keep coming in and taking your players, or you're losing guys to bigger schools. If you're losing guys for other reasons, you have a problem. If you're losing
Yeah.
guys because you're making them better, you're doing a good job.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. The caveat that if you're losing guys to better programs, you are showcasing developmental strides that those programs are acknowledging in those players. And that's why they want to acquire them. So it is to a certain extent a compliment to you and the structure you've built. So I agree. But if you're losing guys because of lack of communication, if you're losing guys to programs in the same tier as you, even God forbid the same conference as you, and those guys are going and thriving in another environment, there's obviously something that you need to reflect on and do different. And to tie back to the first point you made about having a legitimate plan and communicating that, again, not to tie it back, it was a really good conversation. Coach Walter gave us an hour, was just being able to lay it out of like, hey man, this is what we did for Josh Hartle, and this is where we think you are. This is what we did for Rhett Lauder. This is what we did for Brock Wilkin. This is what we did for all of these guys, and having the results to fall back on. So it does still tie back to your past success, right? As being able to sell yourself and sell your developmental program to those new guys, and being able to say, hey, if you trust us, these are the resources we have. Because these guys nowadays are smarter the second they step on campus. They understand TrackMan data. If they honestly, in my opinion, I think it's gotten to the point where they understand it too much. They understand too much that exit velocity, right? Like they are obsessive over it, where they want to chase vert, they want to chase break, they want to chase exit velocity, they want to chase launch, they want to chase bat speed, all of these things that are factors in player development. Guys nowadays are being exposed to that at 14, 15, 16, 17, because on every street corner, you can go find these things. So they understand it. Now it's your job as a coaching staff to get them to understand what's important now, right? What they need to focus on, not trying to do. I mean, I know specifically a couple pitchers that you work with that would obsess with everything. And it's like, dude, you're a sinker guy. Why are you chasing vert? Or, okay, you're a vert guy. Like, it's like they want to know every data point. And it's like, you need to know what's important now. But I think also the other side of the coin of like explaining and showing the value of what you guys bring to the table in the development, and telling them this is why you need to trust us, right? Because we've had these past successes with players and player development, and you can follow the same trajectory utilizing the resources that we have here. And we've shown the ability to utilize those resources better than our competition, because that's the point you made there, where it's like there are some programs and some high level programs that are even really successful, who it is just chew them up and see what the starting nine is. It is go out, play inter squads, let's evaluate, and let's see which cream rises to the top. It isn't let's get this guy in the lab, let's get him broken down biomechanically, let's get him broken down from a ground force perspective, let's figure out what tinks he needs to make, and move this and try this and do this, right? There are programs out there, legitimate programs that have a lot of success, who just want to find the most talented 15 guys that are going to make an impact, and they couldn't care about the rest of you. They wouldn't give you a developmental plan. They're not going to give you the time of day. They're not going to give you anything, because their job is to win baseball games at the end of the day. And that's all they'll do anything to win baseball games. Right. And there's other programs that have a ton of technology that I wouldn't trust a pitcher with, in comparison to a mid-major with none of the technology. Right. And again, not to throw programs out there, I don't want to do that, but it's just there are SEC programs with every piece of technology, in-game biomechanics, ground force, legitimate TrackMan and Hawkeye data that they can take from. And I wouldn't trust their development more than I would trust them with a program with none of it, right? Because it's how you interpret that information, how you communicate it to the player, how you build a plan that ensures the player is going to get the development they need. But that's also with the caveat of understanding that, like, we are in an instant gratification environment. These players want to play. They want to see their development right away. Like, they want to see themselves making stride. They want to see themselves getting better right away. They want the resources to do said things. And even then, it might not be good enough for them, right? They might be moving on to greener pastures the second the opportunity comes. So you have to find a way each and every week to balance development on Monday through Friday, and then be able to put that guy in on a Friday situation and be the best version of themselves, but also find a way for them to be better than that version they were on, let's say, February 13th on May 15th, and then specifically in June, and then ship them off to summer ball, give them a good plan for that, bring them back for the fall. And then same thing, like you have to expose these guys to opportunities because their spot on the roster means more and they could leave at any moment. So you want to maximize your opportunities you get at with from them, but also focus on how can we make this guy the best baseball player he can be 4 years from now.
It's going to sound really obvious, but it's also why like it's important to know what type of kid fits in your program.
Yeah.
Right. And like what type of player do you develop best? What are the strengths of your development, situation? And then personality wise, what type of guys are going to work best in your program, with the other guys you already have in house, with your coaching staff? Because like, I do still think that there's something to be said about being able to bring young guys in, develop them, keep them in house, and build it that way. Because I do think continuity is important. Now, is it everything or just my preferred method? It's probably just my preferred method, right? Like, because you see all across every sport in college athletics, teams are successful. If you're good at being able to get guys in for 1 year or transfer guys in and being able to build a culture that quickly and establish things and get guys to go right away, that's awesome. And it's certainly possible. I just think that, like, for me, getting guys in, keeping them around, building your culture that way through years of stuff. And I think the correct answer is probably somewhere in the middle there, right? It's like a balance of the things, is being able to fill holes when you need them, when you have them, and being able to keep guys in house and develop them to build the foundation, the culture that's already set. But yeah, I think that, you have to know what type of development you're good at, what type of program you are, what type of kid can succeed in that environment. And those are the guys you really need to target. Because I think, it can be detrimental if there's too much roster turnover year over year over year over year.
Well, and I think
you're not going to hit 100% of the time. It's impossible.
Well, and I think the ranges of outcomes are larger when you do that, right? Like Texas Tech and this year's Texas Tech football program is a great example. A program that got all the right portal guys. I mean, actually, let's just eliminate Texas Tech. Florida State, the 2 years, they go 12-0 with Jordan Travis, a full transfer portal, flip the roster, bunch of new guys. You have the right leadership in place, but your range of outcomes isn't looking at a program like Florida State and being like, well, they're blue blood, a lot of history, a lot of talent in the state. They'll go 7-5 in a bad year, right? Right. No, they went 2-10 because when you're bringing in mercenaries, for lack of a better term, I don't really love the term, but when you're bringing in mercenaries, they don't have that sense of loyalty. They don't have an understanding of the culture. They don't have a leadership view of how they see themselves in the roster construction, right? Like they don't want to pick up being a leader. You paid me to be a defensive end. I'm going to go attack the quarterback, and that's it. It's all I want. And when you start losing football games or baseball games, those guys start to really just focus on what they want, right? And what they need and what they are being, quote unquote, paid to do. So I think your ranges of outcome become much larger in the transfer portal if you're going that mercenary route. It can hit and it can be successful. It can be a way to build a roster. But I'm with you. The safer route is keeping your core leadership that can kind of be your culture setters and then filling in pieces so that those guys can take those other guys, putting their arm around them and go, hey, man, this is how we do things here. Just so you know.
And it's probably a fatalist point of view, but like the instant gratification of things, which I think is just such an important factor in all of this. And, typically in society, that's a pendulum, so things could swing back. But like for years now, this generation, and even a little bit of our generation, is instant gratification, right? Yeah. Like it is fully the instant gratification of what you can get, right away. And unfortunately, that's just society as a whole. So like the Disney nature, the fairy tale nature of what we talk about of like, being a part of something that's bigger than you, not caring who gets the credit, and sticking it out in the hard way. Like that's just not how a lot of our society is wired, right? It is the instant gratification. It's the social media microwave era of like, you need to do it. Now, do I think that that always means like results on the field right away? For some guys, yes. For other guys, no. You have to find a way to give them that instant gratification within their development. Show them that, again, like that's why having a plan is important and being able to show them throughout that process of like why a really good practice day matters and like what's the gratification of that? How are you getting better? Look how much better you are from 2 weeks ago, from a month ago, from the fall, whatever it may be. For those types of guys, being able to show them that, because they need the reinforcement, they need the communication. And again, I think a lot of it, instant gratification, the knowledge of things like you said, being able to, they're in environments now 13, 14 years old, learn about pitch metrics and exit velo, and they're having it tracked and they understand that stuff. And another reason why I think it's also important that they agree with you on your development plan for them, because they're probably coming in like, way more than in the past where you would show up and, what your college coaches told you is kind of what you believed and did for the most part. Nowadays, it's like they have preconceived notions, right? They think this is what they need to do. They have an idea of it. So, even more important that like in that recruiting process or in that development process with them, laying it out for them, you better be on the same page. And, because if you're trying to get a guy to do something that he doesn't believe he needs to do, you're never going to get the outcomes you're looking for.
Well, and I think even to the largest extent, the most valuable piece of communication and getting them to buy into your developmental trajectory is because this is just matter of fact. I don't have any stories off the top of my head, but those kids go home, and how many times do they go to their local facility and throw and hit with their guy or throw with their guy? And they have you doing what? Like these blowhards in the private sector that want to be freaking big time coaches and have these adamant viewpoints. Like if you're not getting that player to understand your development trajectory, educating them on why you're developing them the way they are, educating them on the why of everything, right? These guys are more knowledgeable than they've ever been. A lot of these kids go to private facilities, and this is where like I admire, there are private facilities out there, and a lot of them I have relationships with and communicated with that intentionally work with the coach of like, hey, what do you want to accomplish? Even if that might not be what they want from the prospect of their evaluation of their viewpoint on pitching, hitting, whatever, they intentionally go to the pitching coach and say, hey, we've got 3 of your guys. You give us your development plan for them. We will work within that structure, right? We're not going to put our ego involved in our coaching, right? Because all coaches ever want to do in this space, especially in the private sector, is change. We sign up for a lesson. Mom and dad want to see change right away. So we encourage this tinker, change stance, change hands, change your swing. All of these things that come out in these sessions in the private sector, a lot of these people have built up this idea that they know what's best. And there's a tug of war. Like there's a legitimate tug of war between what you're trying to get accomplished to get them to help you score the most runs as an offense, and what private sector BP 40 miles per hour from 40 feet wants him to accomplish. If you don't have complete buy-in from that player, that is where the wild west is, right? Like you send a kid home and just hope and pray that within the 6 weeks he doesn't come back completely different. Like that is a realistic thing, because there are a lot of bad actors in the space that, I mean, I've seen it. High school kid, a month before he went away to college, swing one of the best swings that I've seen from a senior in high school. He's not the biggest freakish athlete, but like mechanically in a great spot. He's hitting at a facility every day. Another hitting coach comes in, starts throwing ideas in his head. I get a call 2 weeks later. Dude, I'm messed up. What happened? I haven't seen you in what do you mean? Like, oh, well, he's hitting coach X said this. I tried it. This started saying more, started sending me videos, started becoming really overbearing about it. I started trying it, and now I've gone backwards. And it's like, that's how fast this stuff happens, especially if it's something like you need to try this and completely change this. Oh, well, like, pitcher, like these guys will tinker with pitch mixes in freaking January, the week before they send a kid back to school. Like they'll be like, oh, you should do this mechanically. But why don't you start throwing a 12-6 knuckle curve? Like that's how, because they don't see the vision. And I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of them don't see the vision that like this has to translate to winning games in a team setting and scoring runs and competing against high level pitching and competing against high level hitters. And we're trying to maximize this guy. We're not trying to build the best TikTok pitcher or like you always say, the 1v1 battle where it's just hitter pitcher. That's all that in the private sector. That's the goal. How can we make that guy hit the ball as high and hard as he can? And how can we make this guy throw as hard and as wicked as it can? That's it. That's the structure. Whereas you college coaches have to build a team.
I was always so impressed with so many of I don't want to bash these guys because there's a lot of good ones, but I was always so impressed by how convicted and absolute they are in everything. And even though like 2 years ago they were convicted and absolute about something completely different, now like they've learned and evolved, and it's like, but every time it's like this is 100% of the way, no matter what. And like I guess my brain has just always believed there's like 16 different routes to get to the one desired destination, and they're just so like it's impressive to me how convicted and absolute that some of these people in this space can be, because it's like this is a really hard subject to get right, and like to go all in like and be like this is the one way to do it is tough.
We talked about it when we left Arkansas, right? There's a structure, and we were talking about it offensively. There's a structure where like being a hitting coach again is about the team identity, scoring runs, competing against high level pitching, right? Liam Doyle punched out 2 batters per inning last year. It's a completely different conversation that Nate Thompson has to have with a hitter to prepare them to face that high level hitter. He might be telling that guy to shave the top half of the ball and try to hit it off of the pitcher's shins, right? It's not this perfect environment where we're hitting it off a tee or we're hitting the ball off of a front toss or we're hitting an easy, here's 40 miles per hour right down the middle. Oh, look at that. You just went poolside jack on the hit tracks, right? And the thing that gets me the most is these college, like they would be the best hitting coach in every facility that they could walk into more times than not, right? Like Nate Thompson could teach hitting any way he wanted. Any way he wanted. You want him to be a teacher man guy. You want him to be an old school guy. You want him to be a launch angle guy. You want him to develop power. You want him to develop, more barrel awareness, whatever he wanted to develop in a private sector facility working with just your generic high school athlete. He would be the best over anybody, like anybody. No, but that's not his goal, right? Like that's not what Coach Van Horn is expecting him to do. And you
one
have
more
to
quick example
that.
I think of, and just one more quick example I think of that always makes me, like when we talk to Coach Hefner, like they have 900 different ways they go about it because they know that everybody wants to, everybody's gonna be different, but they have the team philosophy. And that's why like what was so impressive talking to him is talking, obviously a program that's so good at developing individually, giving these guys, making them better, turning them into really good offensive guys, but still having a team-wide philosophy and being, like a team-wide approach. And there isn't one way he goes about it, right? Yeah. Like he walked us through so many different ways to go about it. Yeah. I mean,
well, again, it's in an environment where you have 20 hitters, 20 pitchers, whatever it is, you have to be adaptable because one guy might be like, you have to be able to, and you might not be able to 100% coach vert or coach. You might not be a good teacher of the 4-seam fastball. You might not be a good teacher of the curveball. You might be more of a slider guy, whatever it is. In the private sector, when it's you standing on the mound with one guy, it's easy to maximize what you might deem your strength, right? College coaches that have to wrangle 20 guys and make sure all of them are getting better have to be able to teach everything. Because one guy might be a guy who needs to make more contact, and another guy might be a guy who needs more power, and another guy might be a guy who is a hit and run guy and a put the ball on the ground guy, and another guy might be a hit 220, but we're going to get 15 homers out of you. Another guy might be able to hit vert. Another guy might be able to hit sink and breaking balls. You have you might not be 100% the best at any one of those things, but you have to be really freaking good at all of them to be that successful as Coach Hefner is. And that's where those guys are different. Is it's so much easier to coach in one-on-one. You identify what that player needs to fix and you attack it. Imagine having 20 guys with completely different things, how open-minded you have to be, how understanding you have to be to other ideas, how understanding you have to be to the individual, right? And what they might need in that scenario and what they might want as well, and communicate that. And all that's to say, like, how does this impact player development? How have we gotten off on this tangent where we're just ragdolling private facilities? It's just a matter of, you have to understand as a college coach how many cooks are in the kitchen, how much access to information these players have. I mean, it's not even, and how quickly you can get them to understand your philosophy for them in that environment of getting them to perform as quick as possible. I mean, it's as crazy. Like, you've seen it, right? We've all seen it, right? Kid comes in, you think he got something figured out. He comes in, he's showing hitting coach a TikTok video of this guy does this. And it's like, dude, that's completely opposite of what you should be trying to accomplish, right? Like I'm sure you've had guys that want to come in and they want to be Zach
There's
Wheeler and they should be Corbin Burns.
there's
Like, it's like,
a there was a guy who was pretty popular on social media when I was coaching, and like his whole thing was he would just try everything. And so he would have some new, like, just try it and put it out there. And like the misinterpretation of just because it's out there that is a good thing. And like the amount of times that I was like, well, I saw this guy doing this drill or this guy doing this. And it's like, stop. Stop.
and guess what? And let me ask you this. Did they not have, was those conversations just in the fall, or was that on a
Oh, it's all year
Thursday
round.
when the guy
Yeah.
had to start the next day?
Yeah, for sure. It's
Like,
all year
these,
round. It's like all the time. Yeah, and it's
all the
you,
time.
and that's why like you have to it's just, again, it's building relationships, it's building trust, it's communicating, and it's
Yes.
so easy and so simple to say, but it's so difficult. And
So,
the last thing I really have on this is like, we ask our hitters and pitchers to be adjustable because they have to be successful. You can't ask players to be that and not be that yourself as a coach. Like, you just have to be adjustable. And that's why I think, I mean, and look, you and I are completely biased. You and I have so much respect for these. I mean, we go and we talk to these people, so obviously, like, we just have a peek behind the curtain and a different view of like everything that they juggle and everything that they put together and how hard they work and how smart so many of them that we talk to are, really all of them. And it's like, that's why I have so much respect for them, and I don't think it's easy to do their job. I think it's incredibly hard. And look, you and I did it at lower levels, and like it was hard. It was really hard, but it was fun. It's a fun challenge, obviously, and it's incredibly gratifying when you can connect with your players and build those relationships. But like, to me, it's like communications, relationships, so important, and you have to be adjustable, and you have to. That takes a lot of experience, which is why coaches with experience matter, which is a completely different topic for another day. But like, it's because they know how to adjust. You know, it's like, would you rather have the doctor who's fresh out of med school? Would you rather have the doctor who's been there for, I was just telling this to someone because we're looking for a pediatrician right now. And it's just like, one practice we went to, all their doctors have been there for like 20 plus years. It's like, you've seen it all. You've seen it all. I couldn't bring my kid to you and you would be surprised by anything. You've seen everything. That's the type of doctor I want.
Would you be disappointed?
Yes, I'm fully. Don't call out my hypocrisy. Don't call out my hypocrisy.
53 minutes. Research actually says that doctors have higher success rates out of medical school than I
know. I was going to say, call out my hypocrisy. And as soon as Danielle's out of med school, will she be seeing our kid? Yeah, like, I'm a hypocrite. I get it, but that's fine.
No, it's more actually, there's research that says that because they're up to date on research and things like that. But that's besides the point. That's my wife in my ear right now telling me not to.
Fair enough.
But you're right in terms of experience matters, right? And being able to, and here's the last thing. College coaches, we've been to a ton of programs. We've talked to a ton of people. And I love every one of them. They welcome us in. All of them are wicked smart. And I think the biggest thing is when you interact with enough coaches, and then sometimes it doesn't translate onto the field, right? It doesn't always translate. Why? It's because even if you're just smart enough to explain these things and understand these things, you have to communicate. You have to make sure 20 guys are pulling on the same side of the rope. You have to make sure they understand their development. And even really, really smart coaches can have one thing break wrong in a given year, and that team might not be very good that spring. That team might stink for all we know that spring, right? And those are real factors into the equation of like, there are very smart coaches that if they haven't communicated their expectations, whatever it is, that it doesn't translate onto the field, even though they can understand TrackMan better than anybody. And it doesn't always translate because that shows the importance of relationships. communication, getting guys to buy in, development, right? Because it could just be a young team that everything doesn't break right for. You have to have like veteran keeping guys in house and those things. And it doesn't, again, the results always don't translate immediately to February 13th through June 20th, right? Sometimes those results take more time to get there, even if somebody is really, really smart.
Yeah, personality. Your personality just might not fit with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's does, actually. So like that
that's
matters
why,
too.
yeah, that's why good programs have bad years and people want to close the book on them. People want to, and then the next year they're back and competitive again, right? Like sometimes the right thing, and that's where probably the transfer portal and NIL era is impacted the most in player development is, again, it goes back to those ranges of outcomes. You bring in 10 new guys. What if they don't hit in year one? What if that guy that you thought was going to be a dude who was kicking back just stinks, right? Like, what if it just stinks? It could have all the talent in the world. Maybe he's just doesn't work hard, doesn't have the discipline, right? It goes back to those, and like, all of it, right, matters. Is like players, you have to understand that there is, if you committed to this program, there is a developmental trajectory right there. Believe in it, buy in it, take your opportunities for what they're given, but don't rush out the door at any given moment, right? The last example I'll use, because we didn't hit on it, but it's something that stands out to me. You might be a Friday night guy at a mid-major program. You've seen this one off season, a mid-major program lost 2 pitchers to Power 4 programs. Those guys combined, one of them had 0 innings at the Power 4 program. Healthy, 0 innings. Went from a Saturday guy at a mid-major program, got offered an opportunity and money to go to a bigger program, and was lost in the shuffle within a week. Understand that. Like, don't rush out the door, because guess what? You can't get scouted from the bench. No. If you want to play professional baseball and your goal is to play professional baseball, you got to play. Like, at the end of the day. So go where you're going to play and be loyal to a certain extent where you're going. Now, if opportunities come up, because again, we've heard Paul Skeens, there's great stories. Alex Madera, there are great stories of guys taking that opportunity that was presented them and maximizing it. Go do it. Just make sure you're in the position to, right? Like, if you're a 300 hitter who has okay power numbers and bigger schools come calling, maybe understand where you're at, trust the development of the coaches that you trusted in to get to that level of success, and stay there. And coaches, again, communicate, build development plans, make sure they understand it, make sure mom and dad understand it, make sure agent understand it. Don't get all pent up. Well, this wasn't the college baseball I started in. If that's the way you think, come join us on the podcast. We're here. We'd love to have a third guest that's a former college coach. Because if you aren't open to that idea of the modern age of college baseball, quit. You ain't going to be very successful for very long, right? We got a spot on the podcast. We'd love to have a former head coach come sit and talk with us on a Sunday morning. So again, it's both sides, right? Like, player development in the transfer portal NIL era, like it's changed. It's more accelerated, but everybody needs to be open to understanding what the realities of it are.
Yep. All said.
Perfect. Well, if you're, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you're still listening and you're not subscribed, you're crazy, because we've rambled on. We've talked about everything under the sun. We've used buzzwords about our society like instant gratification. Where else are you getting that kind of analysis? Microwave society. We talked a little bit about the weather and everything in between. So make sure you smash that subscribe button. We plan on changing absolutely nothing. We're going to talk about player development throughout the spring, throughout the summer. We're going to have cool guests on at some point here that we've been trying to line up to digest what some of these schools are doing from a player development perspective. If you're a player, you want to learn more about the developmental structures of college baseball or professional baseball. If you're a coach, want some educational resources, follow us on all social channels, subscribe to our channel, because we're rolling out daily content that we feel, and many others feel is valuable for you. So make sure you smash that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time on the Baseball Development Hub podcast.